Welcome everyone to another edition of Becoming Awesome, AWS's live stream podcast where Amazon insiders introduce you to the humans of AWS. I'm your co-host, Ray Thomas, senior recruiter with AWS's infrastructure organization, along with my co-host, Jenna, principal recruiter. And whether you're watching live or ready to engage with us or watching this later on, on demand, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today, we will focus on the Amazon leadership principles, diving into what they mean and how to actually prepare for them for your interviews. Whether you're interested in Amazon, interested in interviewing, currently interviewing, or interviewing anywhere else, these insights will pretty much prepare you to put your best foot forward and actually articulate your stories in a way that can be what we call bar raising. So, Jenna, I'm so happy I'm here with you to do this because this is what you and I do every single day for many years. So first off, how are you?
I'm very good. I feel like this is going to be a really helpful session for people that are listening, that have interest in understanding not only how to prepare, but to understand our culture. So while we're not introducing any new humans today, we are introducing some of the values that our humans demonstrate day to day.
I agree. So speaking of that, how would you describe the Amazon leadership principles in the first place? What do you think? What does it mean to you?
I mean, it is our culture, right? So what is a culture? A culture is built off of values. It's what an organization promotes. So Amazon promotes its culture through our leadership principles, or promotes leadership principles, which in turn defines our culture. So they are behaviors and norms and expected norms of behavior. So they define how to act, right? And there are times when we are in situations and it feels confusing and there's a lot of different ways we can go. It's a moment to stop, review, and be led by the definition of the leadership principle in that moment. Sometimes they conflict with each other. So that's where there comes judgment on which is really the right path to take. And so because our culture is so self-directing, I think that this is the roadmap for how to operate in the Amazonian way.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, I always try to boil it down and I say it's a culture of thought. I mean, when you look at the principles, it's literally different actions you've taken, different set of actions you've taken in different situations. Sometimes it requires you to pick up something brand new, learn something brand new. And that's where we talk about learning to be curious. Sometimes we talk about customer obsession, which is where we believe that everyone has a customer, even if they're internal, whether they're internal or they're external, everyone has a customer. And this is where you go above and beyond for them and try to do things that make their lives easier, and for me, I'll definitely share a story that's simple but powerful to one of our hiring managers not long ago. I like to give examples of some stories where I've demonstrated it, so candidates in general can kind of connect the dots and now understand what it really means to be customer obsessed, and then find something within their careers and equate it to that, and then articulate their story in a way that is actually bar raising. So, so I put in the chat. So again, welcome everyone. Welcome Isaiah. Welcome Anastor Juanilo. Welcome Alirio Gonzalez. Pleasure to have you all here, and anybody else that's too shy and too quiet. Don't be shy. We're super friendly. We like to laugh, we like to joke, and at the same time, we love to inspire, we love to help. That's why we still are recruiters after all these years. There's this passion within us to make sure that the candidates we talk to, they are well prepped, and just excited about the journey they're about to embark with us, right? As well as the customers that we support. Happy to get that incredible talent that will help, pretty much improve lives or save lives, because that's kind of what we do here at Amazon. So at AWS. So with that, Yvonne, welcome. Glad to have you here as well. So again, use the chat feature, ask any questions, or type a specific leadership principle. I'm actually going to start to share my screen. Let me do this. At the stage. So I'll also add, I'll give you a link to this right in chat as well. If there's a leadership principle that you'd like for us to dive deep into, we will do that. But for now, while we wait to hear what you're interested in, Jenna, why don't we first talk about something that we say is a critical LP? Like this is something where you must demonstrate in a positive way, and otherwise everything else could be green. But if this is not great, chances are you might not be right for us. So, you know, earns trust. Let's talk about that.
Sure. You want me to start that, or
yeah,
do you want to kick it off?
I'll read it out, and then I want to get your thoughts on,
Okay.
you know, how do we demonstrate earns trust in a real life scenario here, right? So earns trust. Leaders listen attentively, speak candidly, and treat others respectfully. They are vocally self-critical. That's actually a very, very key part. They're vocally self-critical, even when doing so is awkward or embarrassing. Leaders do not believe their or their team's body odor smells of perfume. They benchmark themselves and their teams against the best. And also, Yvonne, curious about our right a lot. We are not always right. Great one. We'll dive right into that right after Ernst Trust, Yvonne. So let's start with Ernst Trust. Jenna, can you give us an example? You know, like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for people to understand what we're really listening for. So, assessing through the leadership principles tell us that you are a fit for Amazon, right? So, we're assessing, can you do the job? You can do the job. Great. You're a great engineer. You're a great architect. You're a great salesperson. That's not enough. We need to know, can you do the job here at Amazon? So what are we listening for? We're listening for behaviors that would demonstrate what the meaning is for earns trust as Ray has read it. So does anybody want to put in the chat, like what they think maybe some of the behaviors are? I can just kind of get your mind going a little bit. It's vocally self-critical, right? Ray called that out as being clear. What does that mean? That means the ability to seek feedback and make improvements. So do you have stories where you had gotten feedback and use that critical feedback to do something differently? So being very specific about what kind of shortfalls you've had and how you've used the learning to develop positive working relationships. And then the other side of it is, can you do the same to others? So how do you also promote earns trust in others? And so can you give critical feedback in a respectful manner? And can you be transparent in your relationships? So always speaking truth, using data to support, not manipulating data to work in your advantage, but being really honest and recognizing where, even if the data is not telling the story you want it to tell. So it is about being transparent. So I actually think this is not in the book, but I personally think that this is a great example, a great leadership principle to showcase working with peers and stakeholders. So sure, you'll have your customer obsession stories for customer obsession and many of the others. But I do think that earns trust is, if you are planning on telling a story that you're trying to show earns trust, I like to think about examples where you're working with peers and stakeholders.
I agree. I'll actually give a story. I'll share a story when I first joined AWS where I was given critical piece of feedback. And then just to give you a quick situation, I was literally 5 weeks into into working here at AWS. I was supporting solutions architect organization, and the team that I was supporting, they had a senior manager, almost like a director, and then they had multiple managers reporting to them. I was supporting a few of those managers, and my peer was supporting a few of the others. During the weekly calls, they would actually, the senior director would be asking about pipeline health, how many candidates do we have, etc., any blockers. And the first few weeks, because I was onboarding, they didn't ask me anything specific. And then in like the fifth week, they asked me about specific. They said, well, for X manager, how many candidates do we have in the pipeline? And I would use the words, oh, we have a few in phone screen and a few in on-site. For this manager, we need a little bit more, I need to work on it a little bit more. So what I didn't know, and it was unintentional, was kind of weasel wordy, maybe, like I was giving them what I knew off the top of my head, only because I wasn't prepared to answer those questions. I personally didn't think I was ready yet. So I didn't look good, and even the manager had called out, we need to know very specific numbers. I said, well, I apologize for not being ready yet. I could follow up right after this meeting and give you the specifics and pull a report. Right after the call, my manager said, hey, I need you to have more fact-based communication. So if you're talking, if you're speaking about something, have specific facts in your communication. So in this scenario is more about the metrics, specific numbers. I didn't know how to pull reports. I immediately went in and pulled reports. I learned how to pull the reports. It was very cumbersome at that time, and then shared the insights. The following week, they asked me again, how are we looking? I went line by line to each one, exactly where they are, who looks promising, et cetera, et cetera. And it turned into a great relationship where I didn't even have to fear the number zero anymore. Like if there was no pipeline, the question that when they were asking it, they wouldn't berate you like, how come there's no pipeline? They are asking you as a partner to understand, hey, what's the blocker? Is it us? Is there something else we can do on our end to help attract the candidates, or is there anything we can do to help you? So again, it was more of a partnership, and the relationship continued to build to a point when, as things changed, the tech communities have changed, things that happen in the world, they're asking me for advice now, versus asking just for pull reports. They're asking like, Ray, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think we should do this? And that's where it became more of consultative, so that's one example of earning trust.
Yeah. I mean, on the other side of that, right? Like, what is not earns trust is probably a good thing to talk about too, right? So all the counters of these behaviors, such as denying or covering up mistakes, or failing to treat others' ideas with
Yeah,
respect, would fall into the concerning types of behaviors for that leadership principle.
I agree.
And certainly not in your case, right? Like you were not criticized. You were not publicly criticized. Your manager would have not demonstrated earned trust if they would have publicly humiliated you. But
Exactly.
just the call offline demonstrated the earned trust behavior from your manager too.
That was a perfect tie-in. I wasn't even thinking of that, but there you go.
Mm-hmm.
They demonstrated earned trust by not publicly shaming me, right? For not being prepared. And then on the flip side, I was vocally self-critical. Oh man, I should have been prepared.
Yeah.
I should have done this. I should know this part by now. Let me quickly learn it and then be ready and be humble about it the next time. And they just continue to grow that relationship. So.
And some of these are things that are just continually like a learning thing. I have one that is a forever earns trust learning, which is somebody once said to me that I have really good instincts, but I don't always share them.
Right.
And so that is something that I am continually evaluating on, should I share my thoughts, my instincts, or not? So it's always a work in progress, I think.
I agree. Thank you for sharing that. Let's go to Yvonne. So curious about our right a lot. We are not always right. It's fantastic. I mean, I mean, Jenna, what comes to your mind first when you
Yeah. So
when you
it's actually not about being right. It's about going through the process to validate or disconfirm if you're right or wrong. So this is a leadership principle that's probably stories that have some ambiguity to it, or maybe you have some instincts about moving in a direction or doing something. And so the behavior of being right a lot is going through this process of validating or just confirming. That could be getting counter perspectives, seeking diverse perspectives, getting alternative data or intel. And you may discover that your instincts were wrong. And that's okay because you were right a lot by going through the motions.
I agree. I agree. By the way, welcome, Yvonne. So Yvonne learns some 182. Again, we're sharing leadership principles that anyone may have questions about, and we want to provide insights about them. So if there's anything that you do want to ask, please go ahead and do so. I was actually going to type that in the chat, but verbalize it instead. So with that, all right, a lot, right? I think it's the key that you hit was validating things. Even when you and I were at the very infancy stages of creating what is now becoming awesome, before it was, recruiter friends take five and then take five, we were trying to validate whether virtualizing, virtualizing the hallway chat, introducing other Amazonians here in an unfiltered and in an unscripted manner would help push the needle to demonstrate some of the cool things that are actually happening here, peeling back the curtains and see if people are more attracted to that. So we were testing that. We were asked multiple people first about the idea, and then we decided to test it, and then take a look at the feedback. Right, we did surveys, etc., and then we were validating our assumptions by the feedback and how the feedback actually translated into people applying more to roles, or even actually accepting an offer when they had another counter offer, another company, based on one of the videos that they seen, but based on something that was said by one of the people on the videos. So again, validation is one of the key things. When you are assuming something before you actually go into putting it into place. So let's see. Yvonne, I have learned a lot about them. Well, that's everything here. Everything is the leadership principles, and it's actually something you demonstrate daily. And you're absolutely right, Isaiah. It takes time to earn trust. Earning trust doesn't happen overnight. It's like any relationship, right? I won't fall in love and put a ring on someone that I just met an hour ago. So again, it takes time to really get to know them, how they actually behave with one another. Sometimes you need to move in, right? So if I'm using the relationship analogy, to really see what their traits and habits are and how they actually treat each other in the most difficult situations.
Can you be respectful about not doing the dishes?
Exactly. Can you admit that you forgot to do the dishes? And not say, hey, you blamed the dog for something else, and it was the dog's fault why you forgot. Let's see. Yvonne, what would be an example thinking big as an individual contributor? Great question. So let's go to think big. Thinking small is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Leaders create and communicate a bold direction that inspires results. They think differently and look around corners for ways to serve customers. Jenna, again, what do you thought?
Yeah, listen, it depends on the role, but the objective here is to demonstrate that you can identify and take bold risks, even if the way to get there is unclear. And so, I don't know, it doesn't have to be like, you created AWS. I mean, it could be something like you inspected a process that wasn't really great for your operation. And so you recognize that there's an opportunity to turn it on its head, and do it another way or completely eliminate it. I mean, that could also tie actually to invent and simplify. But I'm just trying to help you understand that, Yvonne, that it is thinking big, but it's within the scope of your role, right? So think of it as like, what am I doing that's out of the box, right? Where have I used my creative chops to solve a problem? What wasn't working that I have helped make work, right? So it's really more about the identifying and solutioning that is outside the maybe the norm of operations.
Yeah. And you also said something that was very important, which is sometimes it ties into another leadership principle like invent and simplify. So diving deep can lead to inventing and simplifying. Sometimes it leads to learn to be curious. After you dove deep, you realize, I'm sorry, I said diving deep, thinking big. Sorry, thinking big, it does lead to inventing and simplifying, because sometimes like you said, the process is not working and there's a better way to do something. For example, we had when I worked at an agency years ago, we had our ATS, our applicant tracking system, that had the basics. It would literally be contact information, resumes attached to the profiles, and some of the jobs that they would be attached to. And they had this ATS system for probably 15 years. And the times have changed where, times have changed and there's better ways of doing things and better ways of actually, engaging with the candidates in a way where it's not so time consuming. My thought was, let's stop using this and actually get a much different ATS, so we actually went and actually demonstrated, did demos with about 3 different companies. One had all these incredible features, but it was very simple to use. From the ingestion of the resume to actually populate, it would automatically populate keywords, etc. It allowed you to source for candidates much faster. It allowed for discovery of candidates specific to job roles, and it just led to better engagement from having what we call drip campaigns. It'll allow you to have, hey, send this message in our first reach out here, send a message 2 weeks later if they don't respond, so on and so forth. And it would actually automate and schedule it once you actually set it up. It eventually led to increased productivity, where I think we increased the amount of revenue by 400% a month by implementing the brand new ATS. So that was kind of the thing big there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about recognizing the opportunity as a possibility.
Yeah.
And that's what Think Big is. So, like, maybe it was a time you were working on some initiative or goal, right? It doesn't have to be a process or a project or a system, right? Just any time that you were working on something and you just got an aha or some a voice in your head that said, there's a way to do this bigger or better, right? That is thinking big, and that is seeing possibilities. And so from a behavior perspective, we just want to be able to get some insights that you are able to think outside the box and solution, even if it could be small or big, right? So we're not going to say think small, certainly, but I don't want to scare people to think that thinking big means that they need to invent a service.
Yeah, I agree. So again, we look at everything within context. If we're talking to someone that is much earlier in their career versus someone that's much more senior, we're going to expect a different type of story from them, right? So maybe if they're very senior, then maybe we expect them to have invented a brand new service of some sort, versus someone that is in an operational type role where they literally helped improve a process and something simple, but yet still effective, for what they do. Isaiah, question: are all of the LPs utilized during the hiring process, or do you try to hit at least 75% of them? Isaiah, I think for each role, different LPs matter. Different LPs align more. To give you a simple example, one of the LPs is like, where was it? Hire and develop the best, for example. It's usually we keep it for managers because they led teams, and we want to understand how they go about attracting and leading high performance teams and whatnot. If it's an individual contributor role, and we actually look at someone that has an individual contributor profile, it doesn't make sense to have that leadership principle there. But a lot of times there are specific ones that we expect to have on, say, technical interviews, such as learn to be curious, to think big, to earn trust, to diving deep, invent and simplify. Again, even though what Jenna said is you don't have to go and invent something, yeah, it all depends on what your function and role is, and your actual level from early in your career to senior. It all matters. So not everything is there.
Let me try to tackle it too, Isaiah, if that's okay. So your question is, are we trying to cover all of the leadership principles or just a percentage of them? So that's totally right. Like Ray said, if you're not a manager, we're not going to cover hire and develop the best. What I think you need to understand, and what everyone can understand, is if you're going to start to think about interviewing here, time is on your side, right? So to know this information before you even get into a process, I think is helpful to give you the time to prepare. This is a heuristic process. You need to take time, really resurrect examples of work that you haven't thought about in a while, and really think about how you can demonstrate the principles. And so having more time is going to work in your favor. So it's probably about a dozen stories that you'll want to prepare for. So most interview loops will have 5 people, and each person will cover 2 areas of focus. So that's about 10 stories. You don't know if all your stories are going to answer the question specifically. So preparing about a dozen to 16 is probably really wise. The goal of having multiple interviewers is to get diverse perspectives, to ask different questions so you're not asked the same question over and over again, and to be able to collect multiple stories. So key there is multiple stories. To your other point, Isaiah, I see like one story can cover many actions. This is very true. But you don't want the theme of the debrief to be, hey, we heard the same 3 stories over and over again. So it's not a deal breaker to reuse a story, but you don't want that to be the overall theme. Now, the questions are usually pretty obvious in terms of, like what leadership principle goes best with it. But know that even though everyone is assigned to a leadership principle, they are able to assess holistically. So if you feel like you're delivering a story that's demonstrating it's your invent and simplify story, for example, but that interviewer is really asking you a customer obsession question, it's okay. They could either give you the credit for that competency, and or they will likely just ask you some more redirect questions focused on the customer, to be able to get a little bit more insight on the story of where you may or may not demonstrate the behaviors for customer obsession.
Yeah, and one thing we always get asked, are we allowed to repeat the story, etc. My advice has always been this: the only time I suggest it's okay to do so is if you're working on something that was really complex, and it took a long time, where you actually demonstrated in different phases, different parts of the leadership principles. Like maybe believe you're tasked to solve a big problem, and you needed to dive deep, and you really talk about all the layers that you had to go through, whether it was looking at systems, and then each part of the system you had to uncover other pieces, then you had to go talk to multiple sets of people, right? Again, there's a lot of different things that demonstrate the multiple layers of dive deep to say, here's the problem. Now, what happens? You realize there's a problem that may require you to demonstrate learning to be curious, something you've never seen before, something you never tackled. No one else in your company ever seen it before. And you took on the ownership to actually go in and to learn about technology or something that's not currently implemented in your company, to come in and actually implement it here, learn about it, see how it works, talk to different SMEs, and then actually put it into implement it into your services, and then go in. So what I'm trying to say is, you'll dive deep, right? And you can say that, but then when you go to an interviewer, they ask you something that may be about learn to be curious, or maybe invent and simplify, and that story can help. You can, my suggestion is, tell that interviewer, hey, I actually shared this story with the other interviewer, but I went deep into this part of the initial phase because it was more of dive deep. I would like to now give you a lot more details that I didn't share with the other about this phase of the project because it was so complex. That's a time when it's totally okay, and I actually recommended that you do so, because it shows, again, being able to go through, manage a really complex problem that has multiple layers. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Um, Here, we have another question. Recently, I found out how to make small changes in using data storage for our service, which saved thousands of dollars per month. I am not sure if it is related to Think Big. First off, that's awesome. Kudos to you for doing that. Jenna, what do you think? What do you think it really demonstrates here?
So it depends. It sounds like it could spin into Think Big. I wonder if there's maybe some dive deep in here too. I also wonder if there's some insist on highest standards, because insist on highest standards is really about inspecting and raising the bar, right? And so I think that if there's making small changes, there was likely some inspection that was happening to be able to come up with the solution, with the result being saving money. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'll question. I guess my question, if you came up, if I was your interviewer and I heard this and now you hear what's going on in my head, if I'm uncertain if this is Think Big, then I might actually ask, what was the bold risk? And so if you think you can answer that, then that's a Think Big. If you don't think that you can answer and explain how you identified that this was a bold risk, then it might not be a Think Big. It might actually be something like I just shared, and insist on the highest standards, or a dive deep.
Yeah. So I need the context, Ivan, right? Or Ivan, I apologize. I don't know how to, which way you pronounce your name. So Ivan, if I would, when we talk about the STAR format, situation, task, action, result, I look at that as, an action, part of the task and action. My question is, what was the situation? What made you need to go in and take a look at that? Were you just doing random inspection, or was there an issue where the company said, hey, we need to save money here, things are costing us too much, and you were able to dig in and figure out how to make these small changes that saved your company money, right? So I think it's just a matter of understanding what caused you to do that in the first place. What was that situation? And that'll help us, give us a better context. So
yeah, I mean, I guess it's like understanding what was the problem, and then how did you come to this solution of this new perspective of doing things? Can you identify what the risks were of doing it, of not doing it, and just simply why was this bold, right? So that to me, I think would demonstrate some Think Big, because I think that's specifically what the question was.
yeah, so he goes, we needed to save money. That was the situation. So there you go. So if you need to save money, that does require you to dive deep a little bit and figure out, what's being used, what's not, what's costing you more, what's not, right, and see what change you could make. So that can be part of it.
And why was it bold? Bottom line, because that's what that's really about. What was bold about this?
Yeah. And when we talk about these things, one of the big questions that we sometimes ask is, were you proactive or were you tasked to do this, right? And it's okay either way, but it gives us a sense of who you are and at what level you're kind of demonstrating these principles. Some folks, they're proactive. I proactively learn. I'm always trying to find out what's the newer way to attract talent, or what's the best way to share information, or anything that can give me a leg up to get in front of the type of talent that I normally go after. And others are, again, tasked like this. Sometimes maybe you're tasked to it. Hey, you help build these systems. It's costing us a lot. Can you figure out a way to save us money? Either way, it's good. But again, one is more proactive, one is more task oriented. It's good to understand, both sides of your journey. And I think you should be able. I think it's great to have stories where you shared both sides. Here's the time I was proactive, and here's the outcome. Here's a measurable outcome that was very impactful in the end. So
I think it's also good to talk about alternative options. I think that really demonstrates some behaviors and the complexity too. So if I chose this path or that path, right, demonstrating you understand things like one-way doors, two-way doors. You can speak to the pros or the cons of alternative pathways, the risks and the rewards of different options, and edge cases, of course, too. So those are the details that will help the interviewer understand really the complexity of the story and give them some insight into what they can further probe on. So yes, you're telling a story, but it's a two-way conversation. And it is very likely that the interviewer will ask some probing questions. So why did you decide that was the right path? What would be the risk if you did or you didn't? How did you know that was the right pathway to go? The right solution, right? So they could be looking for things like, did you seek out to get diverse perspectives or diverse data points? Were you actually inspecting, right? Are you prepared to take bold risks? Were you asking the right questions to get to the root of the root cause, for example, and dive deep?
Yeah. You brought up something very interesting, right? With all those follow-up questions, it demonstrates your level of knowledge on that specific topic too. It's not just about how you thought, but it also confirms to the interviewer that you actually know what you're talking about. If like they're asked, well, what were the alternatives? So if you're talking about the databases, right? And like, well, what other options did you have? Did you look at this type of database versus that versus this? And you're like, yeah, we actually took a look at these three. And then you kind of went in and dissected as to what were the pros and cons of each and why you landed on this specific one at that moment for that company, right? And that will help them understand, whether it was something that came out of, your hands being tied and you need to use that technology, or you actually made the right choice because you made the right choice given the situation as a whole. So it just reconfirms to the interviewer that you know what you're talking about. And like Jenna said, looking at different options, seeking diverse perspectives, that's key to us. That's absolutely key. All right, keep them coming. Love these questions. They're fantastic. So again, thank you so much for that. So while we wait for more questions, Jenna, what do you think? What do you think is another LP that we should consider?
Yeah, just scroll through. Let's see. Just
start from the top, right? So,
okay. Well, customer obsession. That's number one. We haven't even spoken about that one.
Let's say that, right? We got less than 20 minutes. Let's definitely talk about customer obsession because that's the ultimate. We're Earth's most customer obsessed organization. That's our tagline, right? So again, leaders start with the customer, work backwards. They work vigorously to earn and keep customer trust. Although leaders pay attention The competitors, they obsess over customers. Talk to me, Jenna.
Okay, so obviously, this is the line is leaders start with the customers, work backwards. Okay, so here's my perspective on this one. So that sounds like a good intention. I want to work backwards from the customer. I want to be able to show that I am obsessing over my customer to surprise and delight them, right? But that's an intention. We are looking for the mechanism. So it's not just the passion to want to over deliver and delight for your customer. It is what is the mechanism? How do you do it? So we talk about working backwards. We have working backwards mechanisms, techniques. We want to know what yours are. They could be feedback loops, cadence of meetings, providing the right data to meetings, stopping things that are no longer. So I talked a lot about doing. Now there's a lot of non-doing too. So stopping things that are no longer serving the customers, right? So tell us how you have surprised or delighted a customer. Now, if you find yourself saying something like, the customer was really happy, stop, big yield sign. Why was the customer happy? What was the impact on their business?
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. When I prep candidates, I always like to share anything that I've demonstrated or give them a real life example. And I'll give you a very short story. Had a hiring manager in the genomic space, and this hiring manager is very active on LinkedIn to the point they will talk about the new technologies, the roles they have open, and they would spend hours and hours having info calls with candidates on the back end that was actually eating a lot of their time, but they're doing it because, again, it's out of respect for the candidates and their interests. They're looking to do that. But what I did was I decided to use this platform to record a 10-minute video about the job description itself, everything that he would normally convey to the candidates offline, as far as like, hey, what does the role really entail? What does the day-to-day really look like for them? What are the real qualifications? What are they going to be trying to solve, etc. We had a great conversation about that, and then even asking them specifically, boil this down for me. Why should anyone stop what they're doing right now and actually take a look at this role more seriously and apply to this role? He said, literally, this is the most cutting edge in that space you could be. It's the bleeding edge where you could be. And anyone in this space, it starts here. And we're literally saving lives with this. And that line, when they heard that, it attracted that video that we shared. It did a few things. It saved that hiring manager hours a week from having extra conversations when this one video actually answered most of the questions they would have as far as who should apply, etc., qualifications, and also the nuances to the role. It also attracted passive talent that came across the video. So we had people that were gainfully employed that were applying, because of the passion they heard in their voice. And it led to filling the role about 45 days faster than it would normally take. So what Jenna said is, why were they happy? Well, here you go. Save them hours a week. It filled their role much faster and with someone that was incredible. And it led to feedback to my boss saying, what a treat to have Ray create this video. It saved me so much time, etc. It gave great feedback and really appreciative of what I did by just spending 20 minutes with them, 10 minutes to talk about it, 10 minutes to record, and then post it up. That was a little bit of customer obsession story to share. So, Jenna, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it sounds like in this case, your customer was your hiring manager.
Hmm.
So I think that your customer could also be your candidate. So um, I think it depends on the type of role that one has, but it's really identifying who your customer is and what can you do to work backwards to make sure that you are achieving the desired or not better outcome.
Yeah.
And that your actions that you're taking are going to be impactful for the customer. So I don't know. I think sometimes people do things because they want to do things to make their career, to help out their own career. So kind of more mercenary work versus missionary work.
Hmm.
So I think customer obsession is really showing the missionary work but with technique. So I think your story was actually very good. If you are considering your customer, in this case, to be the hiring manager.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's who it was. My customer was the hiring manager, and making sure that
How is this? So, from a candidate perspective, if a candidate is also your customer, what do you feel is the value for the candidate?
the value is being able to, so when you look at some of our job descriptions, a lot of them look very similar,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it doesn't really talk about the nuances that we care about, that we normally hear from recruiters. And you know what, that 10-minute video, it would either save them time from applying and saying, you know what, because it may not be right for them, right? Or it actually inspires them to apply. So it either saves them time from something that they wouldn't have found appealing, or vice versa, saying, great, I already know I want this type of job. Let's start talking, let's start moving. And they spend more time preparing instead of asking questions, right?
So,
So
I asked Ray that to demonstrate that that could be a probing question that an interviewer can ask if they are unclear really what the value was.
I love
So you have to be able to be prepared to be able to answer that. What was the value for your customer? What was the impact for your customer if you're not quite hearing it?
That's pretty awesome because I wasn't expecting that. And then you just did that as a test. I'm glad I was able to come up with the genuine answer, which was what I shared. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
um, Isaiah, let's see. How are the questions worded to be asked to tell your story? Are the interviewers set up to use the LPs as the question guide?
Everyone is a trained interviewer.
Yeah.
So we have very specific questions and a calibration guide to help the interviewers. This way, it interrupts any kind of unconscious bias, and it requires interviewers to hold true in their assessment to the behaviors and not their own interpretation of the
Yeah.
behaviors.
And also, what it does is it helps treat every candidate fairly. So, for candidate A to candidate B to candidate C, they're all asked the same set of questions, for the most part. From that question bank. So it's not like this one was asked something totally different than the other. You're all treated the same, and it was just a matter of the stories that were shared, from the candidate. So we try to make it as fair of a process as possible. And at the same time, as Jenna mentioned, there's guardrails in there specifically designed to prevent any kind of biases, injected by the interviewer. These are actually trained interviewers that actually go through conscious and unconscious, bias trainings to make sure that we are more data driven. We are focused on the data that we collect and how to ask great questions, based on the stories that you share. So even though there might be suggestive follow-up questions, it just gives them a guide as to what to look out for to validate certain information that you share. Um, so yeah, good question, Isaiah. I mean, overall, right? What do you think is the theme of this, Jenna? Like when you're looking at all this, what do you think is the theme that we're seeing from how we go
Um,
about answering this?
I mean, I think of it as interviewers are taking a journalistic approach approach to getting this information. And yes, every interviewer is trained to raise point, but everyone has a different style. So if you know what the expectation is on what you are delivering, then you can put it in your own hands to make sure that you're sharing the facts of the story and the behaviors. So it's storytelling at its finest, right? The idea of behavioral interviewing is that past performance is an indicator of future performance. So the questions are, tell me about a time when, or give me an example of. Hint, give me a story. Tell me a story. Don't lump in all your experiences and say, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've worked with many different customers. I solved many different problems. Come in with one customer, one problem, and go really deep. What they're listening for is the complexity of the story, behaviors, and impact, right? So, the idea of storytelling, stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So I like to advise that you really, in the beginning of the story, you want to capture the interviewer's interest with the complexity. They want to hear it, right? So it's one thing to say something is complex. It's another thing to show it. Let the interviewers assess if it's complex or not. So you provide the insights of the story to share. So all the nuances, set that at the beginning of your story. As your story evolves and you're getting into the middle of the story, that is really where you want to show the behaviors. And I know we use the STAR method and the A is actions, but actions are truly duties and responsibilities. They don't always show behaviors. It says what you did, right? And yes, we want to hear I over we. But we're listening for behavior. So the only way to reveal the behaviors is to go a little deeper in terms of this like journalistic approach of who, what, where, when, why, and how much. That will likely reveal the behaviors. So of course we use some funky language. You'll see things like dive deep. You don't need to say, I dove deep. In fact, you shouldn't. Let the interviewer assess that you dove deep. So what is dive deep? Dive deep is about asking the right questions. So you just tell your story in terms of what kind of questions you asked, how you may have filtered data to be able to get to the root of whatever it is, right? Just really detailing it, and then ending your story. Stories have the ends with the results or the impact. And avoiding anything that can come off as hyperbole. If you're finding that you're going to say something like it was a significant success, be clear about what significant was. If it is sales or savings, fine, but unless has a relative point, it means nothing. So explain why that number was an important number. And most importantly, we want to hear the impact on the customer.
Yeah.
Right. So what did this do for the customer? And of course, if you're internal, there's no customer, but your customer is internal, is a team, and that's completely fine.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I see one last question. We have less than 4 minutes to go. So I've been in an interview that was to be LP driven, but the interview started to stray towards a technical focus. What's a good way to handle that? I happen to be prepared anyway, but that was not to be the focus. How are you sure that it was not to be the focus? Because usually, I don't. If you have a technical background, when they are asking you questions, it's going to be stories that are more technical. It would try to be a way to see how you demonstrated the leadership principles, but they actually going to dive into the technical pieces of the behavioral part. So again, it's going to validate what you say you did in that story. So if you're diving deep and you're looking at the different technologies, then say the different storage systems, that's where they might ask you different storage questions related, be more technical, just to validate how much you know about the storage systems, especially if that's what you're saying you did, and at the same time, maybe that's part of the function for the role. So again, it's going to be a mixed blend. And the leadership principle stories should align with what you do functionally, for the most part.
Yeah, we're assessing both. Are you a fit for the job and a fit for Amazon? So
Yeah.
you will have technical or functional questions to be able to assess fit for job. And then the LPs are all for fit for Amazon. So sometimes on phone interviews, they may only cover the functional or technical because they're just trying to figure out if you can do the job. And then we'll assess for the leadership definitely during the loop process.
Awesome. We have just another couple minutes. So again, thank you all for the fantastic questions. I hope you learned something. It was I personally like doing these sessions, these Ask Me Anything type of sessions, especially since we train on this all the time. But I put in the chat link to a survey. Would love to hear your thoughts on the specific episode. It'll take you less than 2 minutes. So please make sure you go ahead and do so. Again, if you are watching through AWS's Careers YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/at AWS Careers. Make sure you like and subscribe. And if you're watching on Twitch, make sure you follow us. So twitch.tv/AWS. Actually, follow the other. So if you watch us on Twitch, go and take a look at YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, go and take a look at Twitch. They both have incredible content that'll help you decide whether we're right for you, and even and provide valuable insights again, from a day in the life of to hands-on coding on the Twitch channel with our SMEs that have their own shows. So again, thank you all for joining. Jenna, incredible insights.
Thank you, friend.
Yeah. So you're awesome. Any parting thoughts?
Please share your Afghani lamb spiced recipe that you shared with all of us this weekend. I mean, you shared the food, but we want the recipe. So
thank you. So thank you all. I'm looking at some of the feedback. This was great. I came in late and will definitely be watching the video on demand. Got another one, which was, let's see, hold on. By all, thanks for the killer info. That's from Isaiah. It was great. I liked the episode, and thank you again. So excellent. Thank you all. Have a great one. We'll see you next week.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.